All right, guys. Should we just kick off because Brian's going to join us in a couple of minutes. So we've got Seth Robinson from CompTIA, and Seth is going to share with us a presentation called "Penetrating the Cloud: Opportunities and Challenges for Business." We're going to do about 10 to 15 minutes per presenter, and then leave the last portion of the show for questions and answers, which Henry and I will coordinate. So Seth, whenever you're ready, go for it.
All right, thanks very much, Max. Hi, everyone. I'd like to go through something that we've built after a few different studies that CompTIA has done in the cloud. So just give me a minute here and I'll switch over to the presentation so that you can all see that. Okay, so hopefully you're all seeing the slideshow, Penetrating the Cloud. This is also out on SlideShare. You see my contact information there, email and Twitter handle. If you've got any questions for me during the presentation here or afterwards, I'd be glad to keep an eye on Twitter or answer any emails that you might have. So again, before I get started with the cloud stuff, I want to tell you a little bit about CompTIA. If you're not familiar with us and our mission, we are the premier IT trade association, the largest one out there, and the things that we do fall under kind of a fourfold mission. That's to educate the IT channel, provide certifications for IT professionals, do some amount of advocacy in Washington on technology and small business issues, and we also try to give back through our members, through philanthropy and creating jobs. So all of these things fall into kind of two parts of the organization. One is certification, as you see there, and another one is membership. And I want to talk about both of those things after I wrap up the cloud part. But getting into the cloud part now, CompTIA has been studying cloud for about 3 years. So we've just wrapped up in the past month or so our third annual study on cloud computing. And through that time, we've really moved from studying definitions and trying to define some of the concepts into some usage patterns, and then this year really looking at what the ripple has been for companies that have adopted the cloud. And so I want to present here 4 things that we've seen, sort of high-level concepts that are permeating the cloud industry right now, and then kind of wrap things up with a couple questions before I talk about certification and membership. So the first point that I want to make is something that may be different for you depending on your level of familiarity with the cloud right now. A lot of our members maybe own smaller businesses. They kind of have to keep their heads down, and they come and ask us if we think that cloud is a passing fad or not. Other members have been in the cloud for 3 years or more. They understand it very well, and they understand that they don't think it's a passing fad. They think it's here to stay, and we tend to think the same thing. We see the cloud becoming really accepted as an option for IT infrastructure for a lot of companies. And where we see this coming from is companies are really gaining in their understanding of cloud, especially in SMB sector and among business unit leaders as opposed to IT leaders. We've really seen understanding of concepts and understanding of things like security go up dramatically over the past 2 years. And so that understanding is causing people to become more comfortable. They're understanding what it's all about, what some of the issues are, and it's leading to a higher perception of cloud. We've also seen perception of cloud as an IT option go up over the past 2 years pretty dramatically. And we're getting to a point where people seem to understand the concept pretty well. We might be getting fairly saturated, and the perception of cloud is very strong. And so what that's really leading to is dollars. And if you look at third parties that do forecasting, which is something that CompTIA doesn't do as much for each of the markets that we study, you can see firms like Gartner and IDC just predicting large amounts of growth for cloud, and cloud taking more and more of a piece of the overall IT pie. And we see that ourselves in our research from the end users, that over half of end users are planning on fairly significant investments in the cloud and increasing those investments by what they're doing today. On the channel side, we also see the channel firms that are participating in cloud expecting their revenue to increase. And so we're able to see it on both sides, and we're able to see that companies are definitely putting their money behind this concept. They're really exercising it, and we do believe that this will be a transformational concept in IT going forward. One of the reasons that perception is going up so much is that companies are discovering different ways they can use cloud computing, and they're figuring out that it may not just be an application, it may not be just one thing, but it can be multiple things. So from an early adopter standpoint, early on what you saw was more larger companies going into the cloud, and those companies obviously had large pools of IT resource. And so they were experimenting with things like infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. The smaller companies tended to only experiment with very simple software as a service applications. But now what we're seeing is that among companies that are not using infrastructure or platform as a service, 40% of those companies are planning to do so in the future. And what we're finding is that companies, after they've gotten past this first experimentation wave, are really starting to think through the types of things that they can do with these types of resources at their disposal. And it's causing their business to branch in different directions, and it's causing them to consider other IT trends that are happening. And one of those trends is mobility. Mobility and cloud computing are very tightly intertwined. And as companies get further and further into cloud computing, they're beginning to think of what they can do with mobility and how they can put their data and their applications out there to be used by their employees or their customers in a mobile environment. So one of the things that we see becoming very interesting to companies is mobile application development. And this may come from companies that have not done a lot of software development before, so they may be looking to hire that skill in-house and then use cloud resources for development purposes, or they may be looking for an outside company that has some development expertise to use cloud resources and therefore cut the cost of doing a full-on development. This application development is becoming very important as companies might have legacy software applications that have been customized, and they need to build a customized mobile app to tie into that so that people can use the business system as they're on the road. The other thing that we're seeing as companies are exploring these different options is that procurement is changing, and it's not all coming from the IT shop anymore. You've got companies that have various lines of business that might be interested in something in the cloud, and now their ability to get that on their own is much greater than it was before. The barriers to entry have been lowered quite a bit. And so you have businesses that are really changing the way that they use technology and the way that technology is integrated into their workforce. The third item that we're seeing as we explore how companies' use of cloud is changing is that there's really a wide range of benefits that companies are realizing. Most of them go into it for cost reasons. That's their initial foray. They want to try to cut costs in some way. And as they get into cloud computing and it goes 1 or especially 2 or 3 or more years, they may find that there are some hidden costs. And so as they change from a model of capital expenditure to operational expenditure, some of these hidden costs may begin to pop up, and the cost equation begins to balance out a little bit more. So if they haven't done a full return on investment and really looked out into the future and done a good job of predicting and projecting all the costs, the cost itself may tend to weigh out a little bit. But there are many other reasons that companies are going into cloud and staying in the cloud, and those may be reasons like flexibility or business agility, the ability to shift very quickly, or scalability. The ability to offload some of their computing that's done on-premise into the cloud at peak times. And so what we're seeing is that companies are really finding some of these new benefits, and 44% are actually saying that cloud is the best option for them for a given application or a given process for a multitude of reasons. There's no single reason that stands out, but just as they look at the landscape and they do their assessment of what they're trying to do. Cloud computing and the resources that are out there in either storage or virtual machines really becomes a benefit to them and something that they're interested in. And so we see the benefits ranging quite widely. And this, more than anything, I think, is the reason that cloud is more than just a passing fad, because it does bring benefits to a business and allow them to do something different than they've done before. The final point here is that for all the good that there may be in cloud computing, both end users and channel firms have some challenges in front of them. The research that we do, especially for a large topic like cloud, tends to focus both on the end users, people that may not be an IT firm, they could be in retail or manufacturing or healthcare, but they're using cloud computing. And then we focus on channel firms, so firms that are trying to sell solutions or wrap a service around solutions. And these are three items that have come up in the past 2 years that seem to be large challenges for both end users and channel firms. And the first is a little more on the end user side. That's integration with existing systems, especially where you have a situation where a non-IT line of business person might be going out and procuring a cloud solution. They may be looking at exactly what that solution does, and they may not be thinking about how does this tie into the rest of my workflow. And once they get that solution in-house and they're using it, they might say, oh, I really wish this could tie into the database that I'm using, or I wish this could pass the information on to the next step that I need to take. And that's where some amount of IT expertise comes into play. So if they haven't brought in their IT team during the procurement process, this is a place where they typically find they need to do that. If they don't have an in-house IT team, this is a place where they might be going to an outside provider to help with integration. A second thing that's coming up is vendor lock-in, and this is something that both end users and channel firms really need to be aware of. As they're putting an application into the cloud, and they may be coding some of the integration or some of the calls through that vendor's API. If for whatever reason they choose to not use that vendor anymore, if there's a security flaw or if it's just not working out, if the cost maybe drops in another provider and they want to move to that provider, there could be a significant amount of work to move from one cloud provider to another. And there are things out there like OpenStack that are trying to alleviate this problem, but it is a consideration for businesses that are putting their resources into the cloud, and also for channel firms and consultants that are helping businesses get there. And then an item that's more on the channel firm side is a shift from a traditional MSP model. And we also see a lot of channel firms that haven't even shifted into a managed services model, so they may have a larger step to take. But understanding how revenue is going to be created through cloud services, or how you're going to compensate your sales team, is something that's a big challenge for these channel firms that are trying to offer some form of cloud solution or cloud service. So we see that as something that's really on the minds of our members and of other channel firms as they try to transform their business and take advantage of this new opportunity. So the questions that I would leave you with are both kind of around technology and business. And the first one is, how can operations be more efficient with cloud computing? And that's really speaking about current operations, and this is more about the technology. How can the technology that we're using today be more efficient or less costly or something if we move to the cloud? And then the second question is more around the business. What new areas can we explore now because we have this amount of compute resource at our disposal? So what do we want to do as a business, and then how do we want the technology to help us get there? So these are the types of things that we're going to try to be answering going forward. So a quick wrap up on the certifications and the membership that I mentioned earlier. If you are an IT professional, but you're not part of an IT firm, a channel firm or a solution provider or something like that, you may be interested in the certifications that we offer. We have seen that companies are trying to close the skills gap that they see as some of these new trends like cloud mobility are coming down the pipe. And certifications are certainly a way to do that. Our certifications are vendor neutral, so they provide a good base of knowledge before you move into a vendor certification. And we've really seen some benefit in the research that we've done after people have taken the certifications. And this is seen by third parties also. So you can visit the website there if you want to know more about certifications. And then if you are an IT firm, you may be interested in membership with CompTIA. Membership provides many benefits. We have communities that discuss certain IT topics. Cloud is one of those. We have a cloud community. We also provide channel training and the research that my team does. Those full reports and many of the training packages that we have are free for our members. And we also have networking and some business resources. There are a lot of benefits, and the cost of joining is actually quite low. So I'd encourage you to visit that website there. And so if you have any questions, feel free to touch base with me. But I think my time is up, and I think that's all I have to say. So, Max, I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent, Seth. Thank you very much. I think one of the great things about this panel is we have somebody who can talk about opportunities, and we have somebody who can talk about challenges. So I'm going to move on to Andy. Andy's presentation, Video in the Cloud, Video Everywhere. Andy, can you talk to us about the opportunities in video and cloud, please? Oh, lost you on the sound. Andy,
sorry, I had muted my microphone. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Andy Howard. I'm the founder and managing director of Howard & Associates, which is a consulting firm that focuses on video communications, so helping organizations deploy video conferencing, video streaming, and how to integrate those capabilities into a unified communications solution. So my background includes several years with Vbrick Systems, who's one of the leading providers of video to enterprises, as well as Blue Code Systems, which at the time was called Cashflow, where I kind of pioneered one of the world's first streaming media appliances. So a couple of the projects I've been working on recently are that specifically have a cloud component. I'm working with a healthcare provider that's trying to do a video chat solution where they have their customers can video into what's called a healthcare concierge, and that person can then potentially transfer them to a doctor or a nurse or a personal trainer, whatever makes sense for them. I'm also working with a consulting firm on a large-scale webcasting environment for all their locations. So let me jump right into the slide deck here. Share my desktop. And
perfect.
We'll get right into the topic. So, you know, some of the things that were mentioned before in terms of mobility having a huge impact on the cloud, as well as agility and just basically providing capabilities that couldn't be done before. We'll touch on those topics. But in terms of the agenda, it's really, you know, what is video in the cloud? What does that mean in terms of the benefits that it brings, but also some of the deployment challenges that it's gonna bring, because video is a very different data type than anything else, like, you know, even email or CRM, anything like that. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the different options that are out there from video conferencing perspective, the cloud services, as well as the video streaming capabilities. So in terms of what is video in the cloud, it's really, this means that instead of deploying infrastructure in your enterprise, so for example, in the case of video conferencing, like a video conferencing bridge, you instead utilize capabilities that are out in an internet data center in order to provide that capability. So there's a couple different deployment options. There's private cloud, where you're really renting a dedicated infrastructure in order to accomplish that task. There's public cloud, where you're really sort of just utilizing a service that's shared among a variety of different customers. And then there's a hybrid, and what we typically see is that most organizations are going to deploy a hybrid, a combination of some on-site capabilities as well as cloud-based capabilities, and we'll talk a little bit about why that makes sense. But another key point is that the video endpoints still will typically reside on-site. So if you've got video conferencing rooms, for example, that have video conferencing endpoints, those are going to continue to reside on-site. Similarly, a big trend in the industry is desktop video conferencing as well as mobile video conferencing. So in terms of being able to use your iPad to participate in a video conference just like this, or even using your smartphone. And additionally, in a lot of cases, from a streaming video perspective, you might have studios, or you've got encoding appliances that you might take on site to capture content, and then send that out to the cloud in order to distribute it. So even when you're moving to the cloud, there's still going to be some amount of component that's going to reside on premise. So just to talk about the growth a little bit, Gartner estimates that the services market is growing as a whole, and the services basically means cloud-based services, projected at 40% per year for the next 4 years. So that's pretty huge growth, and I think it's definitely a shift in the industry to provide more capabilities to be able to serve more customers, and we'll talk about why the cloud really helps, especially medium to smaller businesses do things that they just previously couldn't have accomplished. So some of the benefits again are low upfront investment. In the past, in order to deliver a lot of the capabilities of video, you needed to make a big investment in terms of video bridges, for example, management software, firewall traversal capabilities. All these things were typically a box that you would deploy on your premise. Then you'd have to have an IT staff that was knowledgeable enough about these capabilities to be able to manage that, implement it, and especially when you're talking about firewall traversal, there's a lot of security implications. So it required a big investment on the part of the organization. Now that kind of goes away, especially for, like I mentioned, for smaller organizations that just want to be able to purchase an endpoint or even do video on their PCs or mobile devices, and have all that infrastructure be in the cloud, so they don't have to manage it, they don't have to deal with installing it or getting the security set up on it, and it makes the deployment much easier, much lower upfront investment, and basically allows people to do what they couldn't do in the past. Additionally, one of the challenges that's been with video in the past is that it's very, it's to deliver video on a local area network is one thing, and that's become relatively easy, but when you're trying to communicate with your partners and customers over the internet, it makes it very difficult when you have to deal with security, both on your end as well as the partner or the customer's end. How does that all play together? So this, going to the cloud definitely makes that much easier. Additionally, from a pricing perspective, you're moving from a large capital expenditure model to more of an operating expenditure model. So that again gives you a predictable pricing. You really know what's going to happen every year. You don't have to make these large leaps in investment in order to get new capabilities. And finally, the bottom line with video is that it's a very impactful medium, but it also it requires behavioral changes from your users. So if it's difficult to use, people are not going to use it, and that's been the case with enterprise video in a lot of cases. So going to the cloud allows it to work better. It's easier for people to get things set up. You don't have to necessarily go to your IT staff every time you want to do a video conference to have it scheduled and make sure it's going to work. It just works, and it works easily. And if I want to be able to communicate with somebody, I fire up my computer, I go to a video conference room, and I'm able to participate in that conference. And as was mentioned before, you're looking at moving from an environment where, especially with video conferencing, where you had maybe several room systems in an organization. Maybe you've got 10 conference rooms, so you'd have 10 video conferencing systems. That was pretty easy to manage. Now you're moving into the realm where you've got desktops and PCs coming into the mix, and that increases the amount of devices that need to be utilized significantly. And then now you're talking about mobile devices, smartphones, and tablets. It just multiplies even further. So to deploy the infrastructure in order to support all those devices requires a lot more investment. It requires a lot more management time to make sure that it all works. So again, pushing that capability off to the cloud is one of the big pieces in order to enable mobility. So in terms of deployment challenges, you know, again, video, it all comes down to bandwidth, because again, video is a very bandwidth-intensive medium. It also requires consistent bandwidth, so it's not like an email where it takes you a few extra seconds to download a large attachment on an email. That's okay. Video requires consistent bandwidth, so you have to make sure that the network is properly configured in order to support the move to the cloud. And additionally, you know, if you're going to be recording these files, the bandwidth in terms of the storage and the ability to view video on demand is quite high as well. And then additionally, from a streaming perspective, if you're going to do a webcast like we're doing today, you really need to know how many people are going to be watching the webcast, where they're coming from, so that you know that you can support those amount of users. Because if you're going to send a video out to the cloud, for example, but you've got 10,000 people in your organization that are going to watch that same video, you're quickly going to run out of your internet bandwidth in order to support that. So the bottom line is that your networking people really need to understand, you know, what's happening as you're moving to the cloud, how you're going to deal with this bandwidth, and put in the appropriate measures in order to work with that. Another consideration is pricing. So I mentioned, you know, for medium or smaller companies that have not deployed a lot of video, the cloud makes a lot of sense because you don't have to make that big upfront investment in the infrastructure. But for those organizations that already have some investment in infrastructure, you might have hundreds or thousands of users. In many cases, the cloud model could be more expensive. So again, a lot of people are looking at the cloud in that environment as a hybrid solution where I'm going to keep the infrastructure that I've already deployed internally, and I'm going to use that for my internal calling, but I might use some cloud-based services so that I can reach out to people outside my organization, and it's going to make that a lot easier. Similarly, from a security perspective, a lot of organizations are concerned about the information that's typically contained in a video can be very sensitive information. So especially for organizations that are heavily regulated, like financial services and healthcare, security is always a big concern. Now, most of the video can be encrypted nowadays. There are a lot of security mechanisms that go into play here, but again, your security team is going to have to get involved. They're going to need to know that this is a secure solution. And then finally, management. One of the challenges with moving to the cloud is, well, if something goes wrong, how do I know where it's gone wrong? You know, is it the problem with the cloud provider? Is it something on my network? Is it something on the person I'm trying to talk to? It makes when you have issues with the video, it can make figuring out what's gone wrong difficult. Now again, people are creating solutions to make that management much easier moving forward. So I'm just going to give you one quick example of a deployment challenge in bandwidth. So again, if I'm an organization and I have one person on site and I want to call another organization, it's just one video stream going in and out of my organization. That's not a big deal to call a third party. So that's good. But if I'm a large organization, a lot of my video calling is internal, and I want to move to a cloud-based system, then you see that each of these systems is going to have to call out to the cloud and then receive a video back. So you're basically using 3 times the bandwidth going out and 3 times coming back. So it can be very bandwidth intensive. So that, again, and if you start to multiply this by tens to hundreds to thousands of users as you're using mobile devices and things like that, then that can become a problem. In that case, you would typically want to move to like a hybrid type model. So real quick here, I think I have a couple minutes left. I'm going to talk about some of the providers of video conferencing cloud services. So one of the first cloud providers was what was kind of known in the industry as white glove concierge services. So this was if an executive from company A wanted to talk to an executive company B. Again, there was it was very difficult to get that set up in many cases. So organizations would want to make sure that that went off, and it went off without a hitch because it was a very important call. So you'd hire a service in order to basically be the bridge in the middle of that, kind of like a phone bridge service, and make sure that everything worked, and people would be monitoring the video conference and making sure that it worked. Those tended to be very event specific, very expensive per event. So they're still a viable service, but it just has a different one particular use case. And then there's what's popped up now are what's called any-to-any cloud-based services. So these are companies like Eugene's Network or Vidtel that basically allows you to take video from traditional video conferencing endpoints like from Cisco and Polycom and Lifesize and Video, as well as even Skype or Microsoft Link, and it can tie those all together so that basically you don't have to worry about what the person on the other side has. You know that you have the confidence that it's just going to work. Additionally, now the video conferencing manufacturers, the people that make the video conferencing endpoints and the infrastructure, are now moving also to providing their own services. So it's very similar to the sort of any-to-any services, with the exception of it doesn't typically include like a Skype or a Google Talk or something like that. It's typically using traditional video conferencing equipment. The web conferencing providers like WebEx and GoToMeeting are now providing video capabilities in their services. They're kind of positioning those as this is just another added benefit of the service. The video quality isn't quite as good, but in many cases it doesn't matter. It's really just a talking head, so it's good enough. And then finally, you've got consumer services such as Skype and this Google Plus Hangouts like we're using here, Uvu, and other services where the cost is extremely low, and that can be deployed without any effort on the part of the organization. Many times it is actually free or very low cost. Like for Skype has sort of a premium service that's I think $8 a month, which allows multi-party calling. But again, the IT organization is giving up a little bit of control because they don't control those consumer services. It's kind of up to the service. There's no support, things like that. So here's just an example of I've got a couple. Their big claim to fame is that everything's happening in the cloud. They don't make any of these endpoints. They just make the service that makes them all work together. So you can have traditional video conferencing like Polycom or Cisco. You can add Skype in there. You can call people from Microsoft Link, mobile devices, even bring in multiple people that might have different capabilities. This is another diagram from another company called Video, and they're this is more positioning the hybrid model where in the enterprise you might have infrastructure that's deployed on, for example, a virtual server, but you also are using cloud-based services even from Amazon or other cloud-based services that can provide the services that are going over the internet. So this is, again, it's more of a hybrid model. And then finally, just to wrap it up, in terms of the video streaming cloud services, there's really a few different options here. The first are online video platforms. Those tend to be organizations that initially were more targeted to providing services for media-based companies to allow them to stream video over the internet. So, ABC, NBC, HBO and things like that. They're starting to move into the enterprise to some extent. However, they don't really understand that hybrid model as much. They're really typically really only have expertise in delivering video over the internet. Whereas another option is enterprise media management software. So there's a variety of companies out there, such as vBrick, Cisco, Polycom, which purchased a company called Encoding, and Kumu. And these organizations all started delivering video on enterprise networks, and now their customers are saying, well, I want to also deliver that content out to the internet, so I want to have that hybrid solution where I have your equipment on site to deliver it internally, and I also can use your cloud service to deliver externally. And so that's become a more and more important application for a lot of enterprise customers. Cloud-based encoding, that's pretty simple. Instead of having, for organizations that have very high volume encoding environments, rather than having a rack of servers in-house, you can basically just send the files off to a service provider. They'll do the encoding for you, and then they'll transfer the files back. That does require a lot of bandwidth getting the files in and out, but it does save you a lot of money in terms of having all this equipment. And then finally, content delivery networks are in place to basically deliver the video streams over the internet so that you don't have to host all that content on your own internet bandwidth and then stream it out.
Brilliant.
So that's pretty much the end of my prepared remarks. I think we're going to have some questions at the end. My contact information's all right here. So with that, I will pass it back to Max.
Terrific, Andy. Thank you very much. I want to just reiterate that one element that we're very focused on is facilitating connections between our expert panel and viewers who want to further engage with them going forward. So I'm going to now move on to Brian. Brian Doyle is going to talk to us about the importance of IT disaster recovery to SMEs. So very much a presentation, I believe, that's going to be focused on the challenges associated with cloud computing. Take it away, Brian.
Thanks very much, Max. I truly appreciate it being a part of this today. Great speakers that I've heard thus far, and hopefully I can follow up and give you guys some good content and understanding as well. So with that said, I'm going to tell you first a little bit about myself. I run our IT and data center services here at PCNet. We're located in Connecticut. We're a managed service and cloud service provider providing data center services around infrastructure as a service and disaster recovery and backup, which is what I'll be talking about today. So with that said, I'm going to share out my desktop now, and we'll get into the presentation. I apologize.
No worries. Take your time. The screen share on the upper navigation. There you go. Perfect. Thanks, Brian. Brilliant.
Excellent. Not seeing that on your end?
Yeah. If you can go back on the screen share, you had it up there. It was crystal clear.
It's crystal clear?
Yeah, actually, if you can just put it back on the screen share, because we've gone back to your video now. If you click screen share and then desktop and then share your desktop again.
Yeah, my apologies.
No worries.
Good?
Not yet. You had it set up. You had it set up there before.
How about now?
No, still no. Go on screen. When you press the upper navigation screen share, does it? It gives you a choice of what to screen share, right?
It does. I'm just wondering why it's not pulling up what I'm showing. Folks seeing it now?
No, still not seeing it. No, I think it's just, Brian. It's I'm think when you press screen share on the upper navigation, what does it? What commands does it have there? There you go. That's it.
All right. My apologies, guys.
No worries, mate.
We'll have to talk about technology, and then we have our own little struggles there.
No worries. That's as long it's up there, and that's all that's important. Terrific.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of disaster recovery to the small to mid-sized business today. One of the things I want to focus on a little bit is reducing the risk to corporations in securing their data so they don't have a large-scale data loss event. Basically, there's been a lot of studies that go on out there about what data loss can mean to an organization. The biggest thing that I've seen out there, and these were studies that were conducted by folks like Microsoft and Gartner, that 88% of the businesses that have a large-scale data loss event are actually out of business within the first 2 years after that data loss event. What are some of the reasons that contribute to something like that? Well, obviously, in order to operate, they need to have access to any intellectual property they've created, any accounts receivable, accounts payable, and client identifiable information. And when they have those data loss events, this really becomes a large problem for them. Some of the challenges that we see when we're out talking with our small to mid-sized organizations is they don't really have security controls in place to take care of that data. What does that mean? Some aren't even going as far as backing up their data. Other folks are backing up data on insufficient means to actually capture all their critical data. And that brings us to the third point, which is the majority of SMBs have never actually tested their disaster recovery plans. So when they have a moment where somebody comes to them, one of their end users as an example, and says that they've lost a critical email or lost a file that they were looking at, they're not able to recover and bring those back and restore that into their environment. So those are some of the problems that the SMB are facing. A bigger problem when there's a widespread data loss event is reputation risk. Obviously, we're all in business, and we've all got a lot of competition out there. And if we're not seeking our reputation, our customers are ultimately going to look at alternate measures for getting the services that they require. As a company, we're finding that we need insurance to cover those third-party liabilities, or we're going to find ourselves in a position where we can't actually sustain our existence. So we have to look at protecting our data so we don't fall into those kind of events. And then when we do have a breach, how do we make sure that we're not letting personally identifiable information go out to end users out in the market space? So some of the associated costs that companies are facing when they have a data loss event is customer notification, again, tweaking that reputation a little bit, and then credit monitoring itself. They might have to provide credit monitoring services to those end users. That could be a very costly endeavor if you've got a couple thousand clients that you're protecting data for. And then, of course, there's the potential cost of litigation, and, of course, just being negligent is never a good thing for your company and organization's reputation. But the biggest thing is you have an inability to service your clients in an outage event. So reputation risk is one of the biggest things we hear from our end users when they're saying, why should I protect my data, or how can I better protect my data? What are some of the challenges, though, that customers are facing today? The biggest thing that we're seeing is that data is becoming much more decentralized. It's kind of funny because, as networks grew and as infrastructure companies were going on and creating local area networks, the whole goal was to get data more centralized and make it accessible in a very secure manner. But today we see organizations that are trying to implement bring your own device initiatives, i.e., letting end users bring in their tablets, their smartphones, maybe even laptops. And they've got to now safeguard that data to make sure it doesn't walk out with those end users. Teleworking is becoming a much more readily acceptable way of getting talent on site for customers. And these teleworkers have access to business critical data, but they're not as managed as end users that fall inside your four walls of your organization. So as a result, IT firms are struggling, or IT departments are struggling with how to protect teleworkers' data today. And the last thing is a lot of companies are going out and outsourcing a lot of their key responsibilities like bookkeeping, finance, IT services. And now you're introducing third parties that have access to that data and another person in the chain of custody that you have to work with in supporting that data. So those are some of the data challenges facing a small business. Other data challenges include regulatory compliance. A lot of small companies, whether it's because of business associate contracts in the case of HIPAA, compliance certifications, or if they're working with publicly traded information, which puts them under some of the Sarbanes-Oxley guidelines, they have to make sure that they're protecting personally identifiable information of their employees, customers, and vendors. More importantly, it's really just good business as well. Another thing that they have to make sure they do is really secure and safeguard that client data. The problem we see when we go out and visit a lot of these organizations is everything they're doing today is a very manual process. They need to change tapes daily. Those tapes are often taken off-site by employees, i.e. the receptionist will take that tape home with her, and that's where they'll store it off-site. Challenges we see there is if a tape is taken off-site with one of your employees, what if they don't come back tomorrow? They decide this is their last day. That data is now out there circulating, and you need to find a way to safeguard it. Virtually all the companies that we speak with, if they don't already have a strong data protection plan, don't have any automation in place. And again, I go back to that. A lot of these things are not thoroughly tested. So some of the industry analysts have a lot to say about this, and two of the big bubbles that you'll see before you here that really resonate with me are the one from Gartner in the lower left corner, where it talks about by 2015, more than 60% of the enterprises will have suffered material loss of corporate data because of mobile devices. Again, I'm sure each and every one of you on this call have an iPhone or know somebody with an iPhone, and there's a lot of data that gets exchanged in those devices that don't make it back. Another thing is the average length of a downtime event. What the industry analysts are saying is that a no cloud or no automated backup type strategy can bring you to an 8-hour, if at all, restoration event. But if you have a cloud backup solution, that can significantly reduce the time to potentially 2.1 hours. So let's talk a little bit about what the cost of downtime really is to an organization. A traditional small to mid-sized organization that has roughly about $1 million in sales, if their systems go down and they're not able to support and restore that data, they can lose up to $500 or nearly $500 worth of revenue per hour, and that equates to nearly $20,000 worth of revenue per week. If you look at a company with $10 million of annual sales, those numbers even grow exponentially. You see it's almost $5,000 of lost revenue per hour and almost $200,000 of lost revenue per week. These are large numbers, and for small to mid-sized organizations especially, they usually can't weather the storm of such an event. To put it into perspective, if you look at a strong performing organization and you go on the assumption that they're generating net profits of roughly 8 to 12% of their revenues, for that $1 million company, that would generate $80,000 to $120,000 of net profit annually. For that $10 million company, $800,000 to $1.2 million of that net profit annually. But what does a significant data loss event really mean to them? A week-long outage can cost a company anywhere from 16 to 25% of that net profit. And that's really staggering to a company that's really at the lower end of the spectrum. So what can a business do to safeguard that data? One of the things that they can do is look at an automated cloud backup platform that will allow you to protect any device, application, or system virtually anywhere. What this slide here represents a little bit is a common business that is a little bit widespread in its geography. They've got their main location, a number of branch offices, remote users. They've got a disaster recovery site potentially, and of course they've got those mobile users that we've referenced throughout this. And what you really should be looking when you're selecting a cloud backup or a cloud disaster recovery provider is somebody that can help centralize that backup and bring all those pieces to one place so your IT department or IT provider can centrally manage that data and ensure that that can be recovered when an outage event occurs. From a security standpoint, some of the questions that you really should be asking for any provider that you get engaged with is, do they have the proper security to adhere to those regulatory compliance acts like HIPAA, GLBA, and Sarbanes-Oxley? Is the data encrypted? Is that encryption happening at their site before it even gets transferred off-site to the remote data center? Is it compliant with, the HIPAA, the Sarbanes-Oxley, the Graham-Leach-Bliley Acts out there today? And is all that data being stored in a data center that's been verified for controls like a SAS-70 or SSA-16 data center? Again, this is your data. If you're not safeguarding it properly, it becomes your problem rather quickly. So with that, I just wanted to give you a little high-level overview about safeguarding data and what it means to you. And if anybody has any questions, I look forward to hearing them.
Terrific presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Just a couple, we've got a couple of minutes left here. Seth, a question, and I'm not sure whether you can share this, but I'm curious to know what SME companies you feel are best taking advantage of the cloud space? I mean, what companies are you following from a sort of an SME perspective, and why?
I can talk kind of generally about the things that we've pulled out of our data, our research data. It's you know, at that point we don't get down at the company level, but we're able to kind of segment it and look at the smaller companies and look at what they're doing. And I think where the SMEs are right now and where they're transitioning is a lot of them that have experimented with the cloud have maybe utilized just a software application. Something that they can go out and get on their own without needing a lot of outside IT help. I think the ones that have led the pack, if we look back, you know, over the past couple of years, are the ones that are really trying to get beyond that and maybe utilize the cloud for infrastructure. And what that does is it gives them a bigger footprint than they've had before. It gives them a bigger footprint than they've really, you know, been able to have, because now they can utilize the resources that they need and not have all this overhead on resources that they don't need. And there's a little bit of risk in that, you know, of moving into that area without, you know, fully knowing what that's going to look like. And that's why some of these, you know, have been the early adopters. And I think now what we're seeing is, you know, those SMEs that have only used software as a service are looking at their peers that have expanded their footprint. They're looking at the larger companies and what they've been able to do, and they want to follow up on that. They want to get to a point where they're, you know, using infrastructure in a more flexible way as opposed to using just an application that they can grab in the cloud.
Terrific. Thank you, Seth. And I'm going to ask both Andy and Brian a sort of a similar question in regards to sort of trends and predictions, let's say, for the next 12 months. Starting off, Andy, where do you have any predictions for where you feel video in the cloud is going to go? Are there any features or services or service providers that you'd like to highlight as being sort of trend setting in the video space?
Well, yeah, I mentioned a few. Blue Jeans Networks is definitely one where they've got a very unique solution to tie a variety of things together. But I think the big reason why I think a lot of this the video is going to go to the cloud is that the big boys are starting to pay attention now. So the Ciscos, the Polycoms, the Life Sizes, all those organizations, basically the top 3 video conferencing providers, are all coming out with cloud solutions now. And they're, even Polycom on their most recent earning announcement is basically saying they're going, you know, full-fledged into the cloud. So, you know, that companies don't make shifts like that just based on you know, conjecture. They're definitely getting you know, asked those questions from the organizations that they're selling their products to and their services to. Now, I don't think it's going to be a wholesale shift like I mentioned. There's certain times where it doesn't make sense to go out to the cloud, but there's certainly a lot of cases where it does make sense to go out to the cloud. And I think the biggest growth area is going to be that small to medium-sized business market where they just, in the past, couldn't do things that they can do now that they have these cloud services.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, just talking about video, the one thing, I mean, we're obviously on a Google Hangout right now, but I think just, you know, Google is going to, in my opinion, and then, you know, this is sort of for group discussion, the fact that they're able to integrate this feature into an ecosystem, I think is going to be very hard. I'm assuming all our experts on the panel have had you know, a pleasant experience today in regards to connecting and really being able to sort of interact in this fashion. And you know, we've used pretty much we've used a lot of different service providers out there, from GoToMeeting, WebEx, AnyMeeting, I mean, you name them, Skype, and Google, and the one that, you know, the reason that we've been so drawn to Google Hangouts is certainly because it's part of that ecosystem, and you can share, as you'll see after this event, we'll have that video recorded immediately and ready for distribution. So, you know, I think it's, you know, it's certainly, you know, you go to meetings of the world. I'm going to be interested to see, how they can compete with that, with that sort of competitive advantage, I guess, that Google has. Quite honestly, does anyone else want to comment on that?
Well, I agree with you. By being a video consultant, I get the ability to use really all these different products, and I've used every single one of them. I really like the Google, plus Hangouts capability. I use Skype all the time with people that have Skype. I also use the professional, the more professional products with the organizations that, some of my clients or some of the other people that have deployed those solutions. So what I do, and it's amazing what that allows you to do. Like, I work out of my home office, but I still communicate with people face to face, all day, every day. So it opens up a whole new opportunity for, remote workers and things like that. I think there are, like I mentioned before, like the Google Plus Hangouts, the only place that does get published automatically to YouTube. So, from a security perspective, there's certain organizations that might not want that to happen. Now, for this type of content, it's public. We're trying to get people to come watch us, and that's fantastic. There's other use cases where that might not be a good thing. So I think, I think depending on what you're trying to do, there's certain technologies that are better or worse for each of the different use cases, and that'll continue to be so moving forward.
Brilliant. Brian, trends, predictions for the next 12 months going out? I mean, what, if there's one element that you really want to leave implant in people's minds in regards to recovery and data recovery, what would that be? And what should people, what prediction do you have for us going forward?
Well, we're really seeing that more so than just doing data protection. Companies want to be able to restore and operate quickly as well. So one of the shifts that we're seeing as companies are looking at their cloud backup providers is, can they also provide me the ability to spin up those servers within a data center environment and go live if I truly do have a catastrophic event? So we're seeing platforms like a SCADA software and Veeam software in the virtualization world, giving that ability for these end users to be able to not only just protect their data, but leverage that investment in that data center that they're protecting to then actually invoke a disaster recovery plan and provide a level of business continuance should tragedy strike. In addition to that, we're really seeing that virtualization continues to play into this factor, and the more companies are virtualizing, the easier this process becomes for them to go live. So, again, what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our clients is they demand more out of their backup vendors. It's not about just getting it backed up there and having the ability to bring a file back and restore, but really to take it one step further and give them a place to operate. And maybe even give them that step further than that, which is being enhanced by these softwares as well, to use those backup disaster recovery environments as test environments as well. Again, leveraging that investment so they can go in there and test a new application on their backup data and know that they're not impacting production and work out those bugs before they take it live. So we're seeing an educated consumers asking for more is what it really comes down to.
Brilliant. Do you guys have any questions for each other? No questions for each other. Terrific, guys. That was a great show. We're 1 p.m. EST on the nose. I'd like to thank everybody for their time and for coming on the show. We will be distributing this content to all of you, obviously individually. We'll be sharing it with our audience, and hopefully this discussion is going to continue going forward. I think everyone's presentation was absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.